Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring the civilian experience during the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah,
We always hear about the battles and the generals, but what about the people who actually lived there?
right.
We've got some amazing firsthand accounts and insights from the Caught in the Crossfire exhibit at the Gettysburg Beyond the Battle Museum.
Oh, it's an incredible exhibit.
It's going to give us a whole new perspective on how Gettysburg, went from just an ordinary town to like the center of one of the most important battles in American history.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. When you think about Gettysburg in 1860, it wasn't some, preordained battlefield. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
just a town,
Yeah.
busy town with 10 roads going through it.
10 roads. Wow.
Yeah, it was a hub, banks, taverns, workshops,
Oh, wow.
fertile farmlands.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, about 2,400 people just living their lives.
But with 10 roads intersecting, I mean, that must have made it strategically important,
Oh, absolutely.
especially with its location.
Yeah, exactly. It was a crossroads, literally and figuratively.
Right.
Being just 8 miles from the Mason-Dixon line, that symbolic dividing line between North and South,
Yeah.
it meant that the town had connections and divided loyalties on both sides.
Oh, wow.
It's fascinating, actually. The 1860 election in Adams County, where Gettysburg is located,
Yeah.
Lincoln won by just 6 votes.
6 votes.
Yeah.
That's so close.
Yeah,
You can just feel the tension, like how divided the community must have been.
absolutely. And to add another layer, Gettysburg had a thriving carriage industry
Oh, really?
with strong ties to Virginia and Maryland.
Huh. So they were connected to both sides.
Exactly. So
Good.
economically, they were intertwined with both sides of this brewing conflict.
So even before the first shots were fired at Gettysburg, the war's impact was already being felt there.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Can you imagine the fear and uncertainty hanging over the town?
Yeah.
Hundreds of local men had already left to fight for both sides,
Yeah.
leaving Gettysburg, depleted of its potential defenders.
Right.
And that constant threat of Confederate forces just across the border,
Yeah.
that created this palpable anxiety.
That's got to be terrifying, like knowing that the war is slowly creeping closer to your doorstep.
It is.
Were there any attempts to fortify the town at all? Like knowing how important its location was?
There were some efforts, but nothing on a scale that could really withstand a large-scale invasion.
Right.
The Pennsylvania militia, they tried to organize some resistance,
Yeah.
and some residents even felled trees to block roads.
Wow.
But ultimately, they were ill-prepared for what was to come.
And was it inevitable that Gettysburg would become a battleground? I mean, given its location and the, escalating tensions?
Not necessarily. It was more a convergence of events, almost a twist of fate.
Okay.
Both armies were maneuvering, using those roads.
Right.
And they kind of unintentionally converged on Gettysburg,
Oh, wow.
making it a strategic point of conflict.
So it wasn't a deliberate target,
Right.
but almost like a collision point shaped a circumstance.
Exactly.
Wow, that makes the human impact all the more powerful.
It does.
What was it like for the residents who stayed in Gettysburg as the battle erupted around them?
Oh, it was pure terror for the civilians.
Yeah.
Imagine Confederate forces overrunning the town on the first day of the battle,
Wow.
driving Union soldiers through the streets.
Oh, my God.
And you have terrified residents hiding in their cellars,
Right.
just hoping to survive the chaos.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the fighting
Right.
Confederate soldiers, they ransacked homes.
Really?
Stealing food and supplies, adding to the fear and desperation.
It's one thing to read about these events in a history book,
Mm-hmm.
but hearing about it from the perspective of the people who lived through it,
It is.
that's a whole other level of
It
understanding.
really is. And, that Caught in the Crossfire exhibit really brings those experiences to life.
I bet.
One of the most impactful elements is this soundscape.
Oh, wow.
They recreate the sounds of the battle using recordings of period weaponry.
I think hearing that would really drive home the terror and chaos they must have felt.
Oh, it does.
We're so used to seeing war through like images and video, but to actually hear the sounds of battle, it's
Yeah.
got to be incredibly visceral.
It is. It puts you in the moment.
Yeah.
Helps you grasp the reality of what those civilians went through. And you
Ah.
realize that, the impact of war on civilians,
Yeah.
that fear, that sense of helplessness, it's timeless.
Yeah. It's a chilling reminder that even in a conflict as seemingly distant as the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
the human experiences are still so relevant today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, those experiences had a very real cost.
Of course.
Around 30 civilians were killed or wounded during the battle itself.
Wow.
And others died later from diseases or from handling unexploded ordnance.
That's awful. So it wasn't just the immediate impact of the battle, but like a lasting trauma
Right.
that lingered long after the fighting ended.
Exactly.
What happened in the aftermath?
Yeah.
How did the residents even begin to rebuild their lives in their town?
Wow. It was a monumental task. Imagine Gettysburg, a town already reeling from the loss of loved ones, the destruction of property,
Right.
and now facing this daunting challenge of rebuilding,
Yeah.
and from scratch practically,
Yeah.
and with no organized aid like we have today.
Right.
They had to rely on themselves.
It's easy to overlook that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we're so used to the idea of government agencies and relief organizations
Yeah,
coming in after a disaster, but back then it was really up to the community.
exactly. The resilience of the people of Gettysburg is truly remarkable.
Yeah.
Civilians became volunteer nurses, transforming their homes into makeshift hospitals
Wow.
to care for the wounded.
That's incredible.
They took on the grim task of burying the dead, with the Black community playing a crucial role in moving thousands of bodies to the newly established cemetery.
It's a testament to the human spirit, isn't it? Like how, even in the face of such tragedy,
Yeah.
people find a way to come together and support each other.
Mm.
It makes you wonder about the stories within those stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were those individual acts of courage and compassion like?
Well, the Caught in the Crossfire exhibit shares some truly moving accounts.
Yeah.
From diaries and letters, for instance, there's the story of a young woman named Tilly Pierce,
Okay.
who at just 15 years old witnessed the horrors of the battle firsthand and bravely helped tend to the wounded.
A 15-year-old girl thrust into the role of a nurse amidst the carnage of war.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image.
It is. And her story, along with countless others, reminds us that history is made up of individual lives, each with their own unique experiences and perspectives.
And these individual experiences,
Uh-huh.
especially those of the civilians caught in the crossfire,
Yeah.
they often get overshadowed by the grand narratives of battles and generals.
That's exactly right. And that's precisely why the museum's mission is so important, to
Yeah.
shed light on those often forgotten voices,
Right.
to give them a platform and ensure that their stories are remembered.
It's also a reminder that the impact of war extends far beyond the battlefield.
Absolutely.
Even those who don't pick up a weapon are forever marked by the experience.
Precisely, the Battle of Gettysburg left an indelible mark on the town and its people.
Yeah.
Physically, emotionally, psychologically, the scars ran deep.
Speaking of the battle itself, there's one element of the fighting that I'm particularly curious about, the defense of Little Round Top.
Okay.
I understand it was a pivotal moment, potentially changing the course of the battle.
Little Round Top was indeed crucial. Imagine 2 rounded hills, Big Round Top and Little Round Top, flanking the southern end of the Union line.
Okay.
If the Confederates had seized those hills, particularly Little Round Top, they could have outflanked the Union Army and potentially won a decisive victory.
So the fate of the battle, maybe even the war, rested on holding that small hill.
It did, and the unit that found itself in that critical position was the Union's 20th Maine Regiment, led by Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain.
Chamberlain. Wasn't he the professor who became a hero?
That's right.
It's amazing to think that someone with no prior military experience
I know.
played such a crucial role in the battle.
It is before the war. Chamberlain was a professor of rhetoric and modern languages at Bowdoin College in Maine.
Oh, wow.
When the war broke out, he felt a call to duty and volunteered to fight for the Union.
So this bookish professor finds himself leading a desperate defense on one of the most crucial battlefields of the Civil War.
Yeah.
It's like something out of a movie.
It is.
What was the fighting on Little Round Top like?
Well, the 20th Maine faced wave after wave of Confederate attacks, outnumbered and exhausted.
Oh, wow.
They held their ground for hours. The fighting was brutal and relentless.
Jeez.
But as the battle raged on, their ammunition began to dwindle. Their lines stretched thin.
That sounds like a desperate situation would happen.
This is where Chamberlain's leadership and quick thinking really come into play.
Okay.
With his men out of ammunition and facing a final, furious Confederate charge, he made a daring decision. He ordered a bayonet charge.
A bayonet charge? That's incredibly risky, almost a last resort, isn't it?
It was a do-or-die moment, and Chamberlain's gamble paid off.
Wow.
The 20th Maine swept down the hill, catching the Confederates by surprise and shattering their attack.
So they held Little Round Top.
Little Round Top remained in Union hands.
What a story. It's incredible how one man's courage and decisive action in the heat of battle could have such a significant impact.
Yeah.
Did Chamberlain survive the war?
He did, despite being wounded 6 times.
6 times.
And his actions at Little Round Top earned him the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
He went on to serve as governor of Maine and president of Bowdoin College.
That's amazing.
A testament to his leadership and resilience both on and off the battlefield.
It's remarkable how these stories of individual bravery emerge from such a massive and complex event. It makes you realize that the outcome of a battle, the course of history, can hinge on seemingly small acts of courage and determination.
Exactly, and while Little Round Top was a significant victory for the Union, the battle wasn't over. The fighting continued, and on the 3rd day, General Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Confederate Army, decided to make a bold, some might say reckless gamble.
Pickett's charge. I've always been fascinated by that moment in history.
Yeah.
A massive Confederate assault across an open field. It's almost hard to fathom
I know.
what led Lee to make such a risky decision.
Lee was a brilliant military strategist.
Yeah.
But he was also known for his aggressive tactics and his faith in the fighting spirit of his troops.
Right.
He believed that one decisive blow could break the Union line and secure a Confederate victory at Gettysburg.
So he was putting a lot of faith in his men's ability to overcome incredible odds.
Can you picture what this charge looked like?
Yeah, let's hear it.
On the afternoon of July 3rd, 1863, approximately 12,500 Confederate soldiers emerged from the woods and began marching across a wide open field nearly a mile in length towards the Union lines on Cemetery Ridge.
A mile-long open field. They were essentially walking into a wall of fire.
It was.
What were they thinking?
It was a terrifying spectacle. As the Confederate troops advanced, Union artillery opened fire, tearing huge gaps in their ranks.
Oh my gosh.
But the Confederates kept coming, driven by a mix of duty desperation and perhaps a belief that they could achieve the impossible.
It's almost unfathomable the courage it must have taken to keep marching forward under such intense fire.
It is.
What happened when they finally reached the Union lines?
The Confederates slammed into the Union defenses and a desperate hand-to-hand struggle ensued.
Wow.
But the Union troops, well-positioned and determined to hold their ground, repelled the attack.
So Pickett's charge failed.
Pickett's charge, that last desperate gamble by the Confederacy, ended in a devastating defeat.
And the casualties.
Horrific. The Confederates suffered over 6,500 casualties, including many of their most experienced officers and soldiers.
Gosh.
The Union losses were much lighter, but still significant.
Yeah.
Pickett's charge marked a turning point in the battle, the moment when the tide truly turned in favor of the Union.
It's difficult to comprehend the scale of the loss, the impact on both sides.
It is.
And in the aftermath of such a brutal battle, what happened next? Did Gettysburg remain a battleground, or did life begin to return to some semblance of normalcy?
Well, even as the smoke cleared and the armies moved on, Gettysburg was forever changed.
Yeah.
It became a place of pilgrimage, a landscape etched in memory and loss.
Right.
And just a few months after the battle, on November 19th, 1863, a ceremony was held to dedicate a national cemetery at the battlefield.
And that's the occasion for Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, right?
Yes.
That iconic speech that so eloquently captured the meaning of the war and the hopes for the future.
Exactly. Thousands of people gathered to honor the fallen, and President Lincoln was invited to deliver a few appropriate remarks.
A few appropriate remarks. That's quite an understatement, considering the impact those words would have.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? The main speaker that day was Edward Everett.
Oh, right.
A renowned orator
Wow.
who delivered a 2-hour-long oration,
2 hours.
It was praised for its eloquence and detail.
Wow.
Lincoln's remarks were expected to be brief and secondary.
Right.
No one could have predicted the impact those 272 words would have.
It really speaks to the power of language, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How Lincoln managed to encapsulate, the complexities of the war.
Yeah.
The profound sense of loss and the hopes for the nation's future.
Yeah.
All in such a concise and moving way.
Absolutely. And what's striking is how Lincoln used the occasion to elevate the meaning of the war,
Right?
shifting the focus from a purely political struggle
Yeah.
to a fight for the very soul of the nation.
Can you remind us how the address begins? I'd love to hear it again with all this context in mind.
87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
It's amazing how those words instantly transport you back to that moment in history.
Yeah.
And it's more than just a historical document. It feels deeply personal, as if he's speaking directly to each person in that crowd
Right.
and to us today.
And he goes on to link the sacrifices made at Gettysburg to this larger question
Yeah.
about whether a nation founded on those principles can endure. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final rest place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this.
It's so powerful how he shifts from the dedication of the cemetery
Yeah.
to this larger question about the survival of the nation itself.
Right.
He's essentially arguing that these soldiers didn't die in vain, that their sacrifices were part of something much greater.
Exactly. And then he turns his attention to the future, to the living, challenging them to carry on the work of those who have fallen. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here.
It's so humbling,
Yeah.
how he acknowledges that no words can truly capture the magnitude of the sacrifices made on that battlefield.
Right.
The real act of consecration happened through their actions, their bravery.
And then he issues that powerful call to action, urging the living to continue the struggle for a new birth of freedom. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth.
It's remarkable how those words spoken in a quiet Pennsylvania town,
I know.
amidst the aftermath of this horrific battle,
Yeah.
have resonated through time, becoming a cornerstone of American identity
Yeah.
and a reminder of the enduring power of democracy.
It's a testament to Lincoln's genius, isn't it?
Yeah.
His ability to distill complex ideas into simple yet profound language that speaks to the very soul of a nation.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey exploring the human impact of the Battle of Gettysburg. From the terrified civilians hiding in their cellars to the soldiers fighting for their lives on Little Round Top, to the enduring legacy of Lincoln's words echoing through time.
It has.
It's a reminder that history is more than just dates and battles. It's about people, their choices, their sacrifices, and their enduring hope for a better future.
And what I find particularly compelling is how the story of Gettysburg connects to so many themes that are still relevant today. The human cost of conflict,
Right.
the resilience of communities in the face of adversity,
Yeah.
the power of leadership, and the importance of remembering and honoring those who came before us.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Gettysburg is a story that continues to challenge and inspire us, prompting us to reflect on the values we hold dear, the sacrifices made to preserve those values, and the responsibility we all have to ensure that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from this earth.
And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to delve deeper into the stories of Gettysburg. Visit the Gettysburg Beyond the Battle Museum, explore the Caught in the Crossfire exhibit, and let those voices from the past inform your understanding of the present.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Gettysburg. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.